Hello, everybody. Welcome along. Another edition of the Cricket Badger podcast. And we talk about all sorts of stuff on here, but we're going to go for something quite serious today. Climate change and sport, how it affects it, what sport can do to make it better as we move forward. And pleased to say, joined by journalist TANYA ALDRED on the podcast today. TANYA, really good to see you. This is a big subject. It's a kind of an ease you in question, but what got you into this? What makes you care about this subject?
Well, I guess I'd kind of always cared about it. I'm I was born in the 70s, so the 80s it was all ozone layer and that kind of stuff. But it did. So I'd always kind of been interested in it. But it actually took me a while to kind of join the dots between the sort of concerns about the environment and cricket. When I think about it now, I can't quite realise it took me so long. And the first time I kind of joined the dots, I suppose, was at it was just at a T20 game, and I'd taken my kids and I left afterwards. And I was just seeing all the rubbish strewn everywhere, just, stuff that, those 6 and 4 cards, and they'd been firing T-shirts into the crowds and everyone's rubbish and stuff after the game. And I just kind of came away thinking, why does sport have to create so much waste, really? And that was just kind of an easy, I suppose it was just, that was a way in. And I wrote something, I think, for Cricinfo, and I tracked down a guy called Russell Seymour. And I don't know if you've heard of him, but he used to be the head of sustainability at Lord's.
Right.
And he's an amazing guy, really forward thinking. He did a PhD on giraffes or something like that. So he's got the kind of the scientific background and the cricket love. So I spoke to him, and then he'd set up BASIS, which is British Association for Sustainability in Sport. So I went along to their meetings, and then it kind of rolled from there, really.
And you're part of this, the next test. It's the reason I came across that was I saw a tweet. It's at the next test on Twitter, and do a few educational things and a few informational pieces on there. It's where is that a number of people involved in that?
Yeah, so we're small but growing. We're I guess a group of like-minded people who are kind of concerned about climate change and concerned about how it's going to affect cricket, and kind of, sport's a real vehicle for, well, it can spread messages about many things, but it's kind of a really good vehicle for passing on information, I think, because people tend to be more receptive. They don't feel like they're being, people don't like politicians or something like that. But if you go along to a sports game and people are talking about something or showing actions that you can reuse at home, I think it's actually a really powerful way of getting information across. And also cricket itself faces an existential threat, really, from climate change.
I saw, ahead of talking to you, I looked back at a couple of the pieces you've written, and there was a piece, it's probably the one you referred to, 2009 Cricinfo, where you talk about the game then. And I was interested to see how you felt that game had maybe come on since then in the intervening sort of 15 years. And just kind of go back through that. You talked about the game itself being fairly simple. In terms of its carbon footprint, actually kind of a load of people going out onto a pitch and playing doesn't particularly have a big footprint, but it's the travel around the game. The fact that, England at the moment, Tanya, they've just been to Pakistan, fly back. They're now out in the Caribbean, then going to fly back. And then, of course, going out to New Zealand. And that's all in a matter of weeks. So the amount of air miles there, and they don't tend to turn right on planes and go back to the seats I usually sit in. They're probably going ones with big leg room. But one of the quotes in this was, unless we're going to end up playing virtual cricket, players have to keep travelling, and so do those coming to watch them. But do they have to travel so frequently, play quite so many games? And you talk about making the matches special again. Let's bring back the tingle factor. But I would suggest that in the intervening period between 2009 and now, there are even more matches. There's even more travel. It's got worse, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think kind of it hasn't kind of got off the the growth train, if you know what I mean. It just is still, the desire is for more games, more. I mean, players themselves have complained about it, haven't they? There's just more games all through the calendar, and then when you throw in franchise tournaments as well, there's kind of cricket going on everywhere. I mean, and it's a difficult one because you don't want to stop people earning a living, and cricketers have a finite period where they can earn money, and then a lot of the growth is with the women's game, or I suppose disability cricket, stuff like that has increased. So you can't really say to people, well, no, you can't grow the game because actually there's enough going on. But I think kind of even if you took away the climate change angle, most cricket fans would just love to have a more fixed calendar where games were more special and they meant something. I mean, I would guess that most people would say that.
I was actually saying that
there was an interesting. Sorry, what did you say?
So I was saying that to somebody yesterday, actually, when we were talking about the T20, because effectively now a T20 journeyman cricketer can go from one franchise tournament to another, just puts on a different shirt, different venue, but playing the same format. And it's nearly 365 days of the year. You can turn on the telly pretty much every single day, and there's a match somewhere being played, often with the same people. And T20, when it first came in, I remember going to Headingley when T20 first started, the first year when it was seen as a bit of a gimmick and a joke. And I think I paid about £2 to get in. And it was hit and giggle and all the rest of it. And then they realised there was maybe something in this. But initially, it was a little bit special because there were a few matches, and you turned up, and it was fun. Whereas now you're kind of almost exhausted by the end of a tournament. There's so much of it.
There was a really interesting piece. I don't know if you saw it, by Tim Wigmore in the Telegraph last week or 2 weeks ago, just kind of talking about, is cricket eating itself or something like that. And just there was at least one or two players themselves kind of quoted saying, yeah, we'd kind of quite like some regulation here. It's a bit kind of Wild Westy in a way, isn't it? With every tournament springing up all over the place. But I guess the thing is the individual, in the grand scheme of things, individual players flying around the world, it's not, though you wouldn't choose it as an ideal way to set up a tournament in a climate crisis. That carbon footprint itself isn't huge, but it's the footprint of the tournaments themselves, and kind of, you've got the tournament, the footprint of fan travel, which obviously thousands of people, and then you've got the actual setting up of the game, and if you're going to try and do that in a green way, how you're going to power it, how you're going to feed everybody, whether you've got recycling, all those kinds of things. And people are starting to think about that. But obviously it's easier to do if you've got money.
Yes. Yeah, well, most things are, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly.
A few of the things you mentioned in that piece in 2009, you talked about the potential for cricket to have solar panels to have energy from that. You talked about having water fountains to refill water bottles, waste found after matches that you mentioned earlier to be recycled, tickets to be maybe cheaper for people coming on public transport than actually coming under their own steam. Almost literally, all boards to be environmentally audited as well, so that maybe, I guess, an independent person could go around to the various cricket boards around the world and say, well, you're not quite doing that as well as you might be. Looking at that, I can't think of too many of those that have actually changed too much in the last 15 years. I did see, though, the Open Golf, I was watching that in the summer, and they had a whole big wall of water fountains where people were being encouraged to come along and fill their bottles up, which I guess is a little bit of a way forward. But
yeah, I think most of the test grounds now will have water fountains, kind of, well, fountains, but somewhere where you can fill your water bottle up. I think some of those things have actually happened. I'm trying to think. Hampshire have just put a whole load of solar panels on their stadium, or in the process of doing that. I think there's some at Lords. Again, it tends to be the ones with more money who are able to kind of invest in the infrastructure. What were the other things you mentioned? Sorry, I've already forgotten.
Cheaper tickets for people coming on public transport.
Yeah, no, I did. I think something, not quite that, but when Edgbaston did a green T20 game, I think it was last season, they had they kind of audited their carbon use during the game, and it wasn't, I don't know if it was free I think it was actually free coach travel from Birmingham New Street to the ground.
Okay.
So people have started to experiment with those kind of things. And I think I saw Brentford Football Club are offering half price train fares in conjunction with one of the train apps. So it's kind of, people are starting to think about this stuff. The problem is, it's just it's just so urgent now.
Yeah.
And the effect. We are feeling the effects of it in this country. I know we had that kind of 40-degree day. Was it 2 years ago? Which was completely crazy, and they had reduced hours in the Championship. But in this country, the biggest threat is flooding, and there's so many grounds that have been affected by flooding, and loads of clubs, even this summer, hardly played at all in April. Loads and loads of kids' matches that didn't happen, and I think we've got to be realistic. When children can't play for kind of 4 or 5 weeks, they're just going to get bored, and they're going to go and want to do something else, and you can't blame them for it.
I'd imagine there's quite a lot of people, hopefully quite a lot of people watching this and listening to this who are interested in this subject to think, yes, right on, let's do this and let's crack it, and cricket can play its part. But there'll be the people who I've spoken to in the past about, what's the point? Cricket's only a small thing in the greater scheme of things. What's the point in even bothering, especially when Donald Trump's just been voted in, he's going to come out of every single pact that America have signed up to. But I always think with things like this, with racism in cricket, the Afghanistan women, I think if cricket can look at itself in the mirror and you clean up your own backyard and then everybody else cleans up their own backyard, there might be small backyards, but overall the neighbourhood starts to look a bit better, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I suppose there's two things to say about that. Firstly is that cricket is huge. It's billions. There's billions of fans. So if each of those people make a change, then that's actually quite substantial. And then I suppose there's what's the alternative to not doing anything? It's doing nothing. And then you just feel helpless. And I think working together on stuff like this, you're not only, I suppose, trying to make, on a smaller scale, your cricket club, or on a larger scale, your county club or your board better. But there's also a sense of community from working together with other people. I wanted to say, I just wanted to mention the Greenest Ground competition, if
Okay.
I can, that's been running in the Cricketer now for 4 years. So kind of it just chimed a little bit with what you just said, which is kind of the feeling of why should we bother? But that all the cricket clubs kind of in the country themselves are quite small. But if you joined all those green spaces together, you've actually got a lot of kind of green space, and you can make a real difference in terms of biodiversity. We've got a blog actually that's just about to come up on the next test. We run a sort of every 2 weekly blog on our website. It's written by Mark Cocker, who's a naturalist and author, and he's one of the judges of the Greenest Ground competition. And he's just kind of done six easy things that you can do for your club, basically. And some of it's quite easy. It's sort of, don't mow, basically not the pitch, but don't mow around the edges. So even kind of leaving, he had this lovely phrase, it's something like, if you leave the grasses to grow long, it becomes like almost a mini rainforest for kind of little mini beasts and butterflies and things like that. So there's kind of just some really simple stuff that you can do in terms of your local club ground, like put up bird boxes or bat boxes, and it can make a real difference.
That was one of my questions about what can you do as a small club, just even if it's just a gang of mates that are meeting, and it's things like that, isn't it? Just being a little bit aware of your surroundings, I guess. Yeah,
exactly. There are actually quite a few grants available out there. I think it's called the County Grounds Fund that the ECB run. So you just need to put it into Google, and they offer various kind of funds. I think it's for I can't remember what it's under, climate change fund or something. And that's mostly for kind of hard infrastructure, like money for rainwater harvesting or money for electric tools rather than petrol run tools. So there's kind of a little fund there that you can go and borrow into. On one of the clubs near us, I know they got a fund they got some money from Greg's the Bakers for sort of solar panels. So there are kind of, if you kind of, I know it's quite time consuming when people are volunteers anyway, but there are kind of things out there that will give you money to do stuff. And then I suppose there's the kind of biodiversity stuff, like we said, just leaving stuff wild or planting various bits of plants or put some hedges up or something like that.
Do you want a classic shave with a new school shaver?
Did somebody want to get their face shaved?
Presenting the Chairman Pro Electric Foil Shaver from Manscaped.
Get shaved!
With interchangeable dual heads, equipped with skin-safe technology to help reduce nicks, cuts, razor burn, and irritation. The Flex Adjust technology adapts to the contours of your face to maintain contact with your skin. Give your face the shave it deserves. Visit manscaped.com now.
We're in England recording this, but cricket's a global sport, and the challenges are different all over the place, aren't they, in terms of what climate change means to people. But the sea coming up. I mean, Donald Trump, I saw him the other day on stage saying, well, I don't care if the water levels go up by an inch in the next 500 years because, we'll have more beaches or something ridiculous. But that kind of, you mentioned in one of the pieces that probably takes about a third of Bangladesh out. And, that it makes a difference, doesn't it, these things?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I suppose the scary thing for cricket is why so many of the countries, the test playing countries, are kind of on the climate edge. Bangladesh, Pakistan, Sri Lanka. You're seeing in India as well. You're seeing really, really hot days. Kind of sometimes almost to the limit of human survival in some places. You've got drought. You've got floods. You have those terrible floods in Pakistan. They're really being hit by the extremes of the climate crisis. And then, in Australia, you had those bushfires a couple of years ago. And basically you can't escape, but cricket is very vulnerable, and particularly because it takes place over such a long period of time. So it's very hard to hide from the sun. And obviously the kind of the pitches and the way it's played means you can't really hide from the changing climate.
There's the test match in India recently. The fans were almost passing out because they hadn't got any water.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
And cricket needs to look after people a bit more, doesn't it, in terms of the heat and how they look after the fans that come along. You mentioned, I think, in one of the pieces about kind of the celebrity endorsement or whatever in terms of the players. Pat Cummins being quite aware, I think, as one of the players of climate change. And Pat Cummins is somebody who I look at and I think, is there anything wrong with you? Because he's basically incredibly good looking, really good at cricket. He seems to be right about most things as well. He seems to have got climate change right. But you say it's quite hard for players to be ambassadors in terms of climate change because somebody will just turn around and say, well, you're flying to India next week, so what do you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're always open to charges of being a hypocrite. Which is why I think it's understandable that people kind of keep their head down and don't say anything because they'd rather stay out of the firing line. But I think it's so important if players can speak up because they've got voices that people will listen to. Like you say, Cummins, he was quite unpopular when he started speaking up about it with certain sort of sections of Australian society, but loads of people were really positive to him about it. And he's made a real tangible difference because he's with his Cricket for Climate kind of organisation. They're trying to put up solar panels on all the clubs in Australia. So you kind of got, free power, but also, you're saving the clubs money at the same time. So it's kind of a win-win. Sorry.
Cricket follows the sun, doesn't it? And the solar panels should be a given, really, shouldn't they?
It should be, really. You'd think there's a huge potential for someone to come in there and say we're gonna cover all the clubs with solar panels, but yes, it really should be. And the other thing that I meant to say about what players can do is, cricket is, unfortunately, like most sports, it's just completely soaked in oil advertising. So he's got a kind of, we had the ICC re-signed their deal with Aramco, so they've the massive sort of Saudi oil giant. So they've been all over all the World Cups. So you have your Aramco player of the match, and they're boarding all the way around the World Cups and various other competitions. There's some IPL competitions. There's the new Guyana, can't remember what it's called, the new Guyana tournament, and I think that's sponsored by Exxon Valdez. So there's kind of oil money absolutely everywhere, and I think players speaking out about that could make a difference.
I did a little bit of Googling to see if there are any examples in other sports. And I have to be honest, I kind of followed football quite closely, and I didn't know Forest Green Rovers were quite as good in this regard as they are, because I think the UN certified them as the first football club to be carbon neutral. They sell vegan food, vegan beer. Their shirts are a mishmash of waste coffee and plastics or something like that. I don't know how they do that, but they're really quite hot on this, aren't they?
Yeah, no, they're amazing. They're kind of a really fabulous example of what sport can be. And actually, there was at Bristol last month, there was a greenest, I'm going to call it the greenest, green sport. Anyway, there was a conference and I've forgotten the name of it, sorry. But Asif from Forest Green Rovers was there, and he kind of threw down the challenge saying, come on, cricket's fallen behind football, in terms of sustainability. And he was kind of really interesting about, what they've done and how they've kind of brought their fans along with them, which I think that's kind of crucial for, I think it's very easy for people like me from the sidelines to kind of, throw things at people in authority, but actually they do have to bring their fan base along with them when they're making these changes.
If I was to make you, I'm going to take you from the sidelines and put you in charge of world cricket.
Oh, God.
What would you do? What would be, if you kind of first day at the job and you sat there and you got your blank notepad in front of you and you thinking, right, I've got the power, I can do whatever I like. What would you check? What would you do?
Oh, God, James, don't give me these. I'm terrible at decisions.
Tanya, what are the easiest hits?
The easy hits. Well, I think it would be to reduce the calendar. That would be I don't know how much, if I've got absolute power, but it would be to reduce the calendar. Ideally, the players don't take too much of a hit financially because you don't want to kill them off. But yes, I would try and make it more sensible, more sustainable for both the players and for the planet. So that would kind of be the first thing I'd do, I think.
I was thinking with the calendar that we got this World Test Championship now, and they're supposed to play each other equal numbers of times, but they don't anywhere near. But we know the calendar well in advance. But we still seem to see these rogue little series where England have only just been to a country and they fly back about 8 months later to go and play another set of one-day internationals. Get them all done in one go. That just makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, I don't. I think it's because people then they kind of owe countries, don't they? Like they've promised. I don't know if they have promised the West Indies, but you've promised this, you promised that, and then you have to kind of keep your promise. And I suppose the thing about England travelling is that they tend to bring fans with them. So if you forget about the sustainability angle, you're bringing much needed money, I suppose. So I mean, I'm not saying it's easy to balance all this stuff. It's not, but I do think there's just an element of less is more, and cricket nothing can continue to grow anymore. Nothing can think that their model is really growth. It should be sustainability and how you're going to live with this kind of the reduced resources we've got on the planet. So yeah.
I'm pleased you mentioned the fact there are water facilities in some test grounds, because I can think back to when I was working at Headingley. If that had been raised at a meeting back then, they'd have said, well, that'll dilute the bar takings and things like that.
Yeah.
So maybe there is progress.
Yeah, I think you can't kind of live in the world we're in now and not kind of worry about it, I think. And especially the younger kids that are coming through, they're looking at a world and sort of thinking, well, we've got to live in this for the next sort of 50 years. So they do want to make change, I think, and it's up to all of us to kind of bring the game with us.
It's extremes of temperature as well, isn't it? Because people kind of think about global warming, which used to be the old phrase for climate change, and then you'd get a really cold day, and they'd say, well, this isn't global warming, is it? And blah, blah, blah. Or we want global warming because my holidays will be better. But we see those extremes. You mentioned the floods in Pakistan. We get cold snaps that are a lot colder than they were. And then we get that ridiculous hot day. I was actually commentating on cricket that day inside in Leeds. And I came out that day, but I'd been watching them sweating, but I was in an air-conditioned studio. And I came outside for a few minutes, and my eyebrows nearly singed off. It was like going on, when you go on holiday and you walk out the aeroplane and you basically can feel the heat on you. It was like that day. It was just, there was no air to breathe that day. It was crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I think a really interesting thing to do is if you talk to the groundsmen, and they actually kind of at the coalface, as it were, and they will talk to you about how it's changed and how much more difficult it is, and how they're, I think at the beginning of the season, I think I spoke to the Gloucestershire groundsman, and he said that there's a grounds staff WhatsApp group, and they were kind of, it was really, really wet, wasn't it, at the beginning of the county cricket season, and it was just kind of, everyone was talking about how if they were going to be able to get the matches on time, and how it's really stressful, and just having to get there, looking at going to bed at night and just hearing the rain falling again and thinking, how on earth are we going to get this game on? Yeah. And then I spoke to the Essex groundsman a couple of years ago, and obviously they have quite different things to deal with in Essex because they have water shortages and really hard pitches. So it's I think it's hard.
I had Ashley Giles on the podcast a couple of months ago, and we were talking about the floods at New Road.
Oh, yeah.
You mentioned that in your 2009 article, and they've got no better, if they've got worse, if anything, haven't they?
Yeah, I mean, they're talking about having to move from New Road, aren't they? Which would be so sad, because it's just one of the nicest venues on the circuit, I think. It's so kind of beautiful. But yeah, I mean, I guess they're just where they're sitting, just right. I mean, why it's so beautiful is because it's on the banks of the river. But yeah. It was really sad, because it is an incredible place to go and watch cricket. But if it's always underwater, there's not going to be much cricket to be played there, is there? Just to finish off, then. I mean, well, before we go through your various contacts and how people can maybe get involved if that's what you require, is there anything we've missed? Is there anything that any of those decisions you'd make if I made you the head honcho, or anything that we haven't discussed that we should have mentioned? Oh God, probably I'll think of it as soon as we stop talking. Oh, the other thing I'd do is forbid all fossil fuel sponsorship from my new cricket deal. That was okay. I'll rubber stamp that straight away. I can't think of anything. I think the easiest, the best thing that, not the best thing, but something that people involved with clubs can do is just to do a little bit of, or just do something to help their club be more attractive to wildlife. Yeah. And that doesn't, hopefully, it involves a bit of kind of elbow grease, but it shouldn't involve too much money.
So it's at The Next Test on Twitter. So you can follow Tanya and her gang on there. There is a website which I'm trying to get into. It's thenexttest.org. If you want to go and look at the website for any other information. There is a donate button on there, I think, to help Tanya and her gang to do this. If people want to get involved, though, and if they're kind of more interested than just listening, they actually want to be part of this. Is there a way in for them? Can they help?
Yeah, of course. I mean, at the moment we there's quite a lot of the gang who are based down in Bristol. I'm up in Manchester, so we have kind of monthly meetings that are just online, this kind of thing. But we do try and do stuff. We've done some kind of what do you call them? We've kind of got together at games, outreach, that's the word I'm looking for. We've done some outreach at games, kind of putting together educational projects. And we'd absolutely love anyone who wants to come and get involved with us. Like I say, we're quite small at the moment, but I mean, the more people we can get, the more stuff we can do. And just to push people again towards if they're looking for funding, to look towards the ECB website, because I know they're really keen for people to take money off them for these things. So do have a look at that. I'm trying to think what else.
Is that just restricted to people in England, or if somebody's listening in Australia, somebody's listening in India, could they play a part as well and kind of make this a global thing?
Oh yeah, please do get in touch. That would be fantastic. I know there's various kind of groups around the world who are kind of working on this stuff. But yeah, we'd love to hear from anyone who's interested.
It should be a global thing because it's a global problem, isn't it? So
it's a global problem, and as I said, there's just so many of us. There's so many cricket fans out there. So we can together. We're powerful, I guess.
Well, Tanya, it's been a pleasure to have you on the Cricket Badger podcast. Hopefully everybody out there can be a little bit more conscious as they go forward with their cricket teams or their travel to games or whatever it might be. And thank you, Tanya, for joining me.
That's a pleasure. Thanks, James. Bye.